Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. Our guest this week is Imam Muhammad Azeez from Salam. We're very pleased to have him with us. Welcome.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for coming. Now, tell us where you were born and raised.
I was born in Alexandria, Egypt, and pretty much grew up there, and lived in Cairo for a few years with my family, and moved out here permanently in June of 2000.
Alexandria and Cairo both hold great historical significance in the world's history and all of those things. Were you aware of that growing up, or was it just the hometown? You were just busy going about your business?
For Alexandria, I was very aware of that. The history is there, and you're taught that history at school. But it's interesting when people who live in Cairo, sometimes they grow old and die without visiting the pyramids, for example, which I find to be very ironic. But in Alexandria, it's different because you have those monuments from the Roman times, from Greek times, and so forth. They're all around, so you can see them every day.
Long years ago, I read, I think in college, and I don't remember where I read it, but that said that the very worst thing that the Romans did was to burn the libraries in Egypt that had thousands of years of things, and they burned them to the ground, and history was lost. And at the time I read that, I thought, that is just not cool, because I love books and libraries and all those other sorts of things. Do you hear histories from parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts, and are those kinds of things passed on? In America, we talk about the cowboys and Indians and the Old West and the stagecoaches and the railroads and those kinds of things. My great-grandfather worked on the railroad. Do you hear those family sorts of histories?
Well, my mother was a lot more interested in me getting my math homework done. That was more of a pertinent issue at home than anything else. But see, I think in the grand scheme of things, the Islamic conquest of Egypt, and sort of like the transformation of Egyptian identity over the centuries, made it where Islam became the relevant subject matter, and everything else just became history, the knowledge of which may or may not be as important. The temples are there, the monuments are there, but Islam is what's relevant today. It's what's important today, and that's basically how we approached it. So I've never experienced my mother telling me stories about the pharaohs, for example, which thousands of years of Egyptian history. It's just something you study at school, and so was Roman time and Byzantine time and so forth.
So were you a good student and math work out?
I was always a straight A student. I would get severe depression if I get a B plus.
And were you raised then in a religious home?
My parents were of average religiosity. They were not extraordinarily practicing Muslims, but they were kind, they were loving, and they would observe the basic tenets of the religion, but they were not scholars or imams or anything like that.
Did you have an influence of grandparents in your life?
Yes. On my mother's side, my grandfather, who just passed away 2 years ago at the age of 92, was an imam for about 45 years of his life. I used to spend quite a bit of time actually at their house, and we used to have very lengthy conversations about religion and life and politics and everything. So I'm pretty sure that must have had an impact on me.
Did you want to become an imam when you were a little boy?
Never even crossed my mind.
No.
No, never crossed my mind. I've always wanted to be a scholar in the humanities and the social sciences. I've always had a tremendous interest in politics ever since I was in middle school. I joined a political party in Egypt when I was a junior high school, which was not a very popular thing to do back then. I had to hide my membership card actually under the rug
Wow.
somewhere in the house so my mother doesn't see it. Otherwise, I would have been in profound trouble. So,
So how did you come to be the Imam at Salam?
it is customary for Muslim boys who attend Catholic schools to undergo a rigorous process of parallel Islamic education. The Catholic school system in Egypt is very powerful and extremely rigorous compared to the regular schooling system. So, middle class and upper middle class families would send their kids to Catholic schools. Of course, it's a Catholic school, but 95% of the student population is actually Muslim because it's a Muslim country. And so my dad was, I guess, was worried that I might abandon the faith or something. So he sent me to a parallel school, a traditional school in which I studied Islam and studied the Quran, memorized it, and the prophetic traditions and Islamic law and Islamic history and jurisprudence and so forth. And honestly, I didn't necessarily appreciate that growing up. So you basically go to school from 8 to 3 every day, then go home for a couple of hours, eat, finish your homework, and from 6 to 9, you go to that other school, which
Wow.
I had my own teacher. So that was not fun. And so I grew up with secular and Islamic and religious education kind of hand in hand, parallel to each other. And when you come out of age and you look back at all that and just you develop a profound sense of appreciation to what your parents have done for you, and that shapes your life, and something that you resented back then, but you realize today it was meant to be, and it made me who I am today, and I'm absolutely proud of that.
This isn't a really good parallel, but it's the best I can do. When I was a boy growing up, we had to get up at midnight and make watering turns on the irrigation canals. Cows had to be milked at 5 o'clock in the morning. They had to be milked. They couldn't go unmilked. Hay had to be, put up in the summertime, 3 crops. Da-da-da-da-da. There was just too much work for a kid. It was a hard time to find time to just have fun. I particularly hated getting up in the middle of the night to make watering turns. Even if it was a teenager, you go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, you knew your dad or mother would wake you up at 2 o'clock and you had to drive out the field and make the watering turns. Mm-hmm. But they had to be done. The fields had to be watered, da-da-da-da-da. And the responsibility of just making certain that everything that applied to the family was working right, fell to you. And so you were learning all of that stuff at a point in time when you weren't liking it at all. But it certainly applied later in life.
Absolutely, and it develops a sense of responsibility that you're not the center of the world.
Well said.
You are a gear in that big engine that is supposed to bring goodness to other people as well, not just you. And as a self-centered kid, you might not necessarily understand or appreciate that, but one day you do. And I try, with all the challenges of American society and the luxuries in which that we indulge, I try to teach those lessons to my kids. Having luck more frequently than other families, I think. But it's definitely something. I think my parents created for us an environment where we appreciated scholarship, we appreciated knowledge as a concept, right? The pursuit of knowledge, learning, getting exposed, getting challenged in your ideas. And it's amazing, I'm 36. It's amazing that I look back at all that and I just see how the plan has been unfolding over these years to bring me to where I am today.
I have liked personally that Muslim people do like to pursue education and knowledge and learning. Most of the friends and associates I have who are of the Muslim faith like to learn, and they want to know a lot about a lot of different things. And a lot of other people just say, well, whatever,
Right.
and away it goes. Now let's go back to how you became Imam at Salam. Can you teach us there how that came to be?
Well, in Islamic tradition, you don't have to, there's no such thing as clergy, so you don't have to be ordained in a formal process. and therefore every mosque or every Islamic center is free to select an imam that is best fit for their purposes. You know, in Christianity, for example, you know, you have the hierarchical model where you have an established church and so forth, and they hire the pastors or the priests or whatever. And then you also have the charismatic pastor model who, you know, starts a ministry, and then, you know, his ministry basically revolves around him. When in Islam, especially Muslim communities in the Western world, you have Muslim professionals who live in a certain town, and they come together and they would like to start a mosque, you know, in which they would worship God and bring their families together and so forth. So they need some religious guidance. They need someone who's more well versed in the religion and its intricate matters. So they go on the lookout for someone who is qualified, and that person may or may not have received a formal Islamic education at reputable schools, you know, such as Al-Azhar University in Egypt or others. So they create a set of criteria, and they create an imam selection committee, and they start advertising the position, and basically they interview people. I remember when I was in Chicago, had just finished grad school, I get a call from a friend of mine who's in Sacramento, and he told me, you know, there's this great place, it's called Salam, and they're hiring and this and that. Like, you know, you're completely out of your mind. I'm not interested in becoming an imam. You know, religious knowledge comes to me second nature, you know, leading the prayers, giving the sermon. I've always done that, but I've never thought that I would do that full time. He said, you know, trust me, they're a really different place, and they're very open. You know, they have very amazing relations with the community, and you're gonna like it. So I thought, you know what, my in-laws live in Sacramento, and I thought, you know, I just go there. It's a, you know, give me free ticket to spend a week in California and visit family.
See how things are going.
And see how things are going. And so I go there. You know, I think it was more me interviewing them than them interviewing me. And, you know, 3 days later, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So here we are.
Well, I've been to hear you teach and preach and share, and one of the things that I really, really like is it's a very loving approach, and yet it's a firm approach. No one has to wonder what you believe and how strongly you feel or may not feel about a particular thing. Now, Salam's a really terrific place, and it is an active part of the Sacramento community. Will you stay and do this for a good many years?
That is a question for God to decide. I have put my faith in God, you know, some years ago, or, you know, most of my life, but particularly with this job, it was a big leap of faith on my part. I was preparing to, you know, I was finishing my master's and, you know, planning to go on PhD and pursue an academic career, and then I was presented with this opportunity to serve God and to serve Him through His people, to serve the community, to bring people together, to, you know, bridge gaps and so forth. So I think it was an incredible opportunity that God put my way, and for as long as He continues to do that, I'm gonna stay on it. If He throws something else in my way, if He thinks that my mission here is complete, He's gonna let me know about that.
Well, you're doing a good work from where I stand. What do your kids think about Dad's the Imam?
Well, varying perspectives there. From my daughter, who thinks I'm just a talking head, to my middle son Adam, who thinks I'm on the computer all the time, because I'm like, when my wife asks him, "What does Daddy do?" He says, "Daddy does computers." He's 5, because I'm sending emails and
Sure.
doing all that, updating my Facebook status, whatever. You rely heavily on technology to communicate with the community.
Absolutely.
But I think there is a sense of pride, especially with my daughter, because I'm the imam, and she attends, you know, Salam Elementary, which is actually a full-time school. that is also located at Salam. So I go to their classroom every once in a while. I lead them in prayer. So she has the sense of pride that her dad is the imam that everyone goes to with questions and inquiries and so forth. And I make sure that with the kids that I share with them some of the challenges that the community is facing, that families are facing, some of the questions, the inquiries, the counseling situations, without mentioning any names, kind of like in a subtle way to expose them to the kinds of things that I would not want them to do in the future when they become teenagers, and actually get their feedback. What do you think? How should I respond to this? That girl was doing this and that, and this is how her parents felt about it. What do you think is the best approach to it? So I'm trying to kind of get them involved in these things at a young age. Ridwan is only 2 years old, so he's still busy with his iPad. But Adam is at the age where I take him to places when I give lectures and stuff like that.
I've met him and seen him.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you
Yes.
did. Yeah, I even took him to the Bay Area a couple of times. And there was a conference that had about 1,000 people. Most of them were actually students from from California universities. And I gave the lecture, and at the end, I recognized him, and I said, I wanted to make sure that you guys know, my son Adam gave me company today. We drove together from Sacramento, and he's been great help in preparing this lecture. So it's just everybody was just all over him, carrying him and kissing him and stuff like that. It was really neat to see.
When I was a child, my father was the Mormon bishop in the town, but he was also head of the irrigation company.
Mm-hmm.
So he controlled the water rights. I mean, it was his vote. There was a board. And sometimes the water was more important than the religion, I think. But I always thought it was cool that, I just thought it was neat. My father would stand up and talk to the group and pray with us and sing with us and greeted everyone, and everyone wanted to greet him, and it was just a fun experience. I didn't ever feel pressure. I just thought it was very, very cool. Your in-laws, your wife, did she grow up here in Sacramento?
My wife was born and raised in Canada.
Oh.
Her family moved out here about 15 years ago, and they have been living in Folsom ever since then.
And how did the two of you come to meet?
My uncle used to remotely know her dad, so just one of those days they met up in Cairo and talked about things, and one of those things was us. So my uncle came back to me a few days later, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think of so-and-so's daughter?" So I said, "I don't even know them." So I said, "Well, they're here, let's go visit them," and stuff like that. And this is how most marriages take place in the rest of the world. I think only in America, where the idol of love is just so rampant and so overreaching, and people, I think, make bad decisions because of a little bit of illusion that goes into that. In the Middle East, I think people tend to get married mostly on rational grounds. And once they have established that that person is the right person for them, they give themselves the time to like them, and then they get married.
Liking is well said, because as you know, after all of that other, you've got to like as well as love. But when you first saw her and first met her, did you say, this is a lovely woman?
It was actually intriguing for me, because I did not, the first time I saw her, well, I was 23, she was 18, so we were very young. But the first thought that crossed my mind was, she's very skinny. Well, she still is, after bearing 3 children.
Lucky her.
Yeah, I always tease her about that. But I was intrigued also by her sense of modesty. Girl growing up in the West, the sense of the self-respect, the way she carried herself, the way she asked questions, was really an intriguing mix between very cherished Western open-mindedness, and at the same time mixed with a really beautiful sense of Eastern modesty and self-respect. I loved that. That was exactly what I was looking for in my partner, and I think I was absolutely blessed.
Interesting you say that to me, that I get to hear that. I saw my wife the first time in 8th grade. And of course she looked really cute. She was going down the hallway and I thought she was really, really cute. But I soon got involved in some classes and things, and the guys would say in the locker room or type class or whatever, don't waste your time on her. You can't hold her hand. You can't kiss her. You can't any of those things. Well, looking back now, I think to myself, that's not what 8th graders should be doing. And so we went along a good long time. We liked other boys, other girls and things, but we kept coming back to each other, and we were well on our way out of high school before that even became a factor. And the boys kept saying, why do you can't even go to the movie and hold her hand? She won't hold her hand. And I was,
as if that's an important criteria.
Exactly.
Right.
But I was really attracted to that modesty. She dressed modest. She acted modest. She was polite. She was courteous. She was bright. And that's really cool to hear about your wife. Now, tell us about misconceptions in Sacramento that people have about the Muslims.
Let me first establish a couple of facts first. People in the West, I think in general, because for the most part, I think they have what they want. They have an abundance of life, so they can afford to go on without knowing about other people and other places and other cultures.
That's very well said.
And whereas people in other parts of the world where there is a relative sense of deprivation, I mean, even if you're wealthy, you're deprived of political freedoms, for example.
Right.
So there's always a sense of deprivation that everyone walks around with. I think they cannot afford ignorance. And by default, people that are born and raised in other societies, they have a natural tendency to question things and to ask multiple questions and not to trust government and not to trust the media. And to always try to find out on their own information about others and so forth. So I grew up in that environment, right? I grew up in an environment where the media was literally owned by the government. And so what they tell you is most likely a lie, right? This is how we were taught. I grew up in an environment where political organization was not allowed. Now today things have obviously changed. This past year was just an incredible development in the Middle East. But growing up in middle school and high school, I saw people around me. I saw people making clear distinction between, let's say, American foreign policy and the American people. So I remember when I was in college. And then we would, remember when I think it was the Clinton administration, and they were, Albright was going around the world,
Right.
kind of rallying support for bombing Iraq and Sudan. And I remember us organizing rallies and demonstrations at the university, opposing, this what we perceive to be American aggression. I mean, here I am today, an American myself, kind of been able to see the picture from the other, from the other side of the aisle. But we would do this like in the morning, we would be demonstrating, and then in the evening we would be sitting at coffee shops with American tourists, talking to them about what we did in the morning, right? And
did they even care?
They were very interested, and they would ask questions, and we agree with you. That's right. Why is our government doing this and doing that? So, of course, I didn't think much of it back then, but today I look back at that, and I find that there is a sense of awareness that people who might be a lot poorer than us and have less opportunities than us here in America, but they are a lot more aware and conscious of the world, and they are able to make those distinctions. Not all Americans are like the American government, or not every American is Bush, and not every Christian is like that, not every Jew is like that. I think people were able to make that. We cannot up until this day, I think there are so many people in this country who cannot make those distinctions because they look at the world black and white. I had a post on my Facebook a couple of days ago, and most of my Facebook posts are public. And I took a photo of one of my favorite trees in the whole world in my front yard, and it was basically blossoming with beautiful white roses. And so I posted it and I said, my tree just surprised me with these beautiful colors. I can't wait for the maroon and the green and so forth. And this random guy, I think from Florida or something, right? A random guy.
Sorry.
I don't know how he got on my Facebook, and he's like, "Oh, tree, that's a female." And without, is not accompanied by a male. Shouldn't it be killed or murdered or something like that? It's like, what? What are you talking about? The audacity in those people. Just, a random guy who probably never met a Muslim in his life and find that to be, this crude joke to be somehow interesting. So I just tried to, control my anger, and I responded in a cordial manner. But that is, again, most Americans are not like that. But there is that sense where people don't know anything about the other, and they're not doing anything about it, right? It is much more comfortable and easier to stay within the confinements of your comfort zone than be challenged and to be shown a different or alternate worldview that'll, forgive me for saying, will make you look like an idiot. And I think people are just comfortable with that, unfortunately. So bias against Muslims in America is not dissimilar to bias against Mormons or Jews or blacks or Catholics, 70, 80, 100 years ago. Or the Japanese in World War II. And so now it's just our turn. This is unfortunately one of the ills of American society, and one that needs to be challenged and one that needs to be dealt with. And I think we're trying to do our part with that.
Thank you very much. It's nice to have you here. Nice to visit with you. Enlightening.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate you coming.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.